This is the Speaking of Writers podcast. I'm Steve Richards. The book is Tom Clancy's Line of Demarcation, a Jack Ryan Jr. novel. The author is M.P. Woodward. New York Times best-selling author and former naval intelligence officer M.P. Woodward returns with this book, the latest installment of the Jack Ryan Jr. series. In this book, A Line of Demarcation, the discovery of an oil field off the coast of Guyana plunges Jack Ryan Jr. into a cauldron of lies. It starts with the destruction of a U.S. Coast Guard cutter and the loss of her entire crew, but the USCG Claiborne was on an innocuous mission to open a sea lane between an oil field off the coast of South America and the refineries of southern Louisiana. The destruction of the ship, tragic as it is, won't stop that mission from continuing. So, who would sacrifice 22 men and women just to slow down the plan? That is the question plaguing Jack, who is in Guyana, working on a deal to get his company, Hendley Associates, in on the ground floor of this new discovery. But Russia's Wagner Group and a pack of Venezuelan narco-terrorists have other ideas and will risk war with the United States to see them through. It's up to Jack to identify the killers before they draw a bead on him. But how can he do that when the line of demarcation between friend and foe is constantly shifting? M.P. Woodward is the New York Times bestselling author of Tom Clancy's Shadow States and the Handler CIA espionage series, The Handler and Dead Drop. Woodward served for a decade as a U.S. naval intelligence officer before going on to an international career in tech and streaming media. Lives in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. Happy to have M.P. Woodward join me here on Speaking of Writers. Welcome.
Hey, Steve, happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Where did the idea for this book come from?
When you're running for the Tom Clancy verse and doing geopolitical thrillers in general, you think about geopolitical hotspots, and one of them that came across my radar was down in Latin America, where there has been this discovery of a huge oil and gas reserve called the Orinoco Shelf. And that's right off the Orinoco River, which sits in between Venezuela and Guyana. And not surprisingly, Venezuela wants to claim it, and it's even, but it's in Guyanese sovereign territory. And so that got me to thinking the U.S. Guyana is a U.S. ally. ExxonMobil is down there developing this field. It is on the size here. It is on the size scale that will really move world markets. So, for example, there are about 1 million Guyanese citizens. This has the potential to make them per capita the wealthiest people in the world. It's like Saudi level kind of discovery, and so that leads to opportunities, I think, for Russia to want to upend the market. They're certainly not going to want that to happen in the Western Hemisphere with a U.S. ally, because that would change supply and demand. So they have a willing ally in Venezuela, and the idea that I had was, well, what if they pulled a Crimea and just came in with little green men in the Wagner group and took it while nobody was looking. So that was the idea behind the book, very much based in real things.
The opening of the book with the U.S. Coast Guard cutter really hooks you in here. A very fast, thrilling opening to this book. The waterway here, very treacherous.
Well, yeah, the interesting, so I talked to some people in the oil industry, and one of the challenges of this discovery of this offshore oil is that it's literally a shelf, so it's very shallow. So the idea was, well, they're very interested in not disturbing that area ecologically, so you're not just going to dredge it all up, and then they have to figure out shallow draft ships to get in there. They're doing this off of oil platforms, etc. So I had this Coast Guard boat go down and improve the waterway so that it would make it navigable for large scale American company ships, like the type that an ExxonMobil would have. And I had some fun with that opening, because I wanted to highlight the things that the Coast Guard does that we all take for granted, like maintaining waterways and
Yeah.
buoys and everything else. and depict a ship like that with a small crew, of 22, that is caught in the crossfires of a significant geopolitical event.
We know that the crew gets lost here. How hard is it, MP, to develop and you develop the characters really quickly on that Coast Guard cutter, but you don't have a lot of time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Prologues are, I think of them sometimes as they're little novels in and of
Yeah,
themselves, where
this
it's like,
really
okay,
is.
yeah, and a reader's got to, it's almost a short story. So a reader's got to come in and go, why do I care about these people? What are they doing there? Oh, why are they in danger? Oh no, I'm emotionally involved. And when it ends, you're like, oh my, that's going to change things in the broader world. And so that's how I like to do prologues. I've done a couple different kinds. There's some that, it's the, hey, this takes place in the future. There's others that tell a real backstory. There's the, hey, this is 2 months from now, and then there's the, this was 20 years ago. In this case, I wanted to think about it more like a spark that lights the fire. That the Tonkin Gulf incident, kind of thing, where it was a relatively small player caught up in a big thing by accident.
Jack Ryan Jr., where is he in this book? Where is he in his life?
Yeah, and one of the things I enjoy writing, or I like about working on Jack Ryan Jr. as opposed to Jack Ryan Sr. is it's fun to develop the next generation of characters. And so in his case, he's in his mid 30s. We're always fuzzy with ages in novel world, but he's probably around 37. He's engaged. And so he's maturing as a man, and he's got responsibilities both to his fiance, and they have not quite not quite an adopted live-in niece, but he's got family responsibilities. He's also thinking about how accomplished his father is and how his father was successful in business before he went into national security. So Jack has Jack Jr. has some things he wants to get done in his life. So he's ambitious in business, and he's also committed to his time and services with the campus.
I'm always fascinated, authors that I have on the podcast here that pick up a series like Clancy. How did you get involved in it?
Well, I had written another series, the Handler series with Penguin Random House, and uh, my that had done fairly well, and my editor for that series was also the editor for the Clancy books, and so one day he basically called up and asked me, and he said, hey, would you be willing to, he's like, I will call your agent, we'll work it out, but I just want to check, would you be willing to do this? And I said, yeah, sure, I would. He said, well, before you answer, he said, realize that it's like one book every 7 months. Like the pace is pretty intense. So it's going to be a challenge. But that was more or less how that happened. And then the way that he brought me into it was to say, hey, don't try to write like somebody else. I'm picking you for this because I like the way you write. So yes, you're getting into this world of characters, and you can drive those characters, but drive them in your way was the guidance he gave me.
So when you started, did you or had you read a lot of Clancy's books, or did you really bulk up on it in a hurry?
Yeah, I mean, yes and yes. So I had read quite a few of them. I grew up with them, so I read
Mm.
all the original Tom Clancy's. I'd read about probably two-thirds of the later ones. I hadn't, I needed to go back into the earlier junior series to really get. That was where I did most of my research in terms of reading the Clancy books, was going back to the junior series and looking at that origin story and the adventures he'd already had and that kind of thing. And also, when I did that, I found a guy who was young and gung ho and a little bit impulsive and prone to sort of go rogue. So what I'd like to think about is, okay, yeah, sure, somebody in their late 20s, early 30s might be a little more like that. as you mature in life, as you get more responsibilities, you become a little more sober about things. Your judgment maybe gets a little bit better. You're a little less governed by those emotions, and that's something that's an arc that I see Junior being on right now.
MP, how challenging is it to develop a character that's already been defined and developed?
Well, he has been defined and developed, but you do get to look at this as being at a new stage of life. So
Mhm.
you're not going back and saying, okay, I'm going to write about a 35-year-old and somebody else has already written about that 35-year-old. It's like, no, he's got a past, and I can let that be in the past and I can let that inform who he is. But that doesn't mean he can't develop forward. So I don't find it all that much different than in some ways, I find it easier than developing characters from scratch because you don't have to explain a lot of backstory. People
Yeah.
already know who he is. So in that respect, it actually helps a little bit.
Do you hear from the Clancy family at all?
I don't hear directly. That is really filtered through the publisher and the editor.
So you don't hear directly, but you'll hear from the publisher and editor
Yes,
sometimes.
yeah. I should say they act as the intermediary between the author and the estate.
How'd you become a writer?
I was a well, you read my bio earlier, but when I when I was in business, I had always wanted to be a writer. When I was in the military, I tried a few times, then I kind of set it aside. Then I was in business for quite a while and was still interested in it. And I was very fortunate in my business career in that it gave me a lot of international travel. I met people in all kind of walks of life, and the it just never really left. It never really left me. And I so around 2019, 2018, 2019, went before COVID when I was still traveling a lot. A lot of this was written on very, very long flights to other parts, not Clancy, but my first book was written on long flights to the other parts of the world and refining it from there. So, simple way to say that is I guess it was a hobby while I had a day job, and then that turned into the day job.
Does writing energize you or exhaust you?
Writing energizes me for sure, and you can get super excited about a story, and when you put down the pen, so to speak, at the end of the day, and you feel very accomplished and you know excited about it. There are other times I happen to have this year. I will have three books come out in the second half of 2020. Within 6 months, right? And so there was sort of I will say there was a collision this particular year of you go through the process of there's the copy edit phase and then there's the galley proof phase and et cetera. So you end up having to, reread the book again and find, mistakes, changes, et cetera. So to do that for three books within the concentration of, less than a month has kind of worked out. That can be that part can be a little bit exhausting, although extremely, extremely necessary and valuable.
What other authors are you friends with, and how have they helped you?
Yeah, so I've gotten to know Don Bentley was the gentleman I took this series from, and I had already gotten to know Don a little bit because we were both with with Berkeley Books, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. And also in that was Mark Greeny, and so talking to Don and Mark was super helpful. They both because Mark had done Clancy books. I think he did seven. So getting some coaching from those guys was really fun. Also, trading war stories is fun. And then I've recently gotten to know Jack Carr a bit as well, and I think just being able to swap experiences and kind of I wouldn't say trade ideas on plots. And I kind of go out of my way to not read these other authors because you don't want to borrow. You can almost accidentally start imitating, and you don't want that. But it is fun to compare notes on process. Like, man, oh man, how did you feel about this? Or have you started this? Or how's the deadline for that? Those kinds of things. And that's been super valuable.
Yeah, you mentioned Mark Rainey, who's been on this podcast recently. I just saw him speak at the Savannah Book Festival back in February.
Yeah, Mark's a great guy, and he actually blurbed my very first. His name's on the cover of my very first novel, and we sat down at a conference, and he was the first one to give me some advice. And the biggest piece of advice I remember taking away from that was he just said, "Keep them coming," right? Like, don't you can't slow down. You have to kind of keep producing. And reflecting on that now in a series where there's a book due every 7 months, it's like, yeah, of course that's true. But I also think it speaks to the nature of entertainment. In a way, it is highly perishable, right? We've all seen this. A movie comes out, it's the biggest deal ever. A few months go by, it's not as big a deal anymore. A year goes by, and people go, "Oh yeah, I remember that movie." And so it's not too dissimilar in thrillers. You want to write something that's going to endure, but people want to see new stuff coming out. And so keeping up that work ethic is something that he advised me to do early on.
MP, is there one book that made you want to become a writer?
Oh gosh, maybe the Cane Mutiny by Herman Wouk, which I read in high school, and that was a Pulitzer Prize winner. And I
Yeah.
loved the arc of a person who starts off at sort of college age, and he's sort of soft, and he goes through this giant great adventure that lasts for a couple of years, and he's a different person by the end of it. And I just thought that was really well done. And so I love character development. It's something that I'm kind of passionate about.
The great Herman Wouk. And what would you
Yeah.
like readers to take away from Line of Demarcation?
If you like Clancy, if you like fast-paced books, you're going to like Land of Demarcation. This is the fastest paced book I've done. And I don't mean from like, breathless storytelling style. What I mean is the novel unfolds over in real time, 3 days. So act one is day one, act two is day two, act three is day three. That was something that was new for me. That was kind of an experiment, but it led to something that was, when you bring in multiple points of view and geopolitical things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it leads to a quite a fast pace. So this book is heavily action oriented, particularly from about the midway point on, and was just a ton of fun to write.
What's the best thing about being an author?
I think conversations like this, honestly, I love contributing to the world of literature being part of what's out there. I consider that to be a great honor, especially in something like the Clancy verse, where there's such a legacy. It feels meaningful to me, and that's what at the end of the day we all want out of our lives is meaning.
Well, this one out now, Tom Clancy's Line of Demarcation, a Jack Ryan Jr. novel. And so you're going to see a lot of MP Woodward for the rest of this year, as you mentioned earlier. What, three more books later
Aren't
this
you
year?
lucky? Yes, that's
Yes,
right.
can't wait.
Yes.
It's an MP Woodward year. So,
Indeed, indeed.
well, this one you can enjoy this summer at the beach. Tom Clancy's Line of Demarcation, MP Woodward, the author of the #1 New York Times bestselling series. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure, Steve. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good seeing you. And this is the Speaking of Writers podcast. Thanks for watching. I'm Steve Richards.